Hello and welcome to the Fantastic Fluency Podcast, brought to you by FantasticFluency.com, helping students around the world master English every day. Here is your host, Tom Mudge, the world's preeminent English teacher and a pretty nice guy too.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel, and if you're new, welcome. I'm Tom, and this is Fantastic Fluency. Just to remind everyone before we start this podcast here, that the reason these podcasts are around 30 minutes, more or less, is to give you as much listening input as you could possibly want. So don't worry if you're busy doing other things. You could still do those things and listen to this podcast. Remember that passive listening is also input. And if you're really serious and really committed about improving your English as much as possible, you will need as much input as possible each and every day. Okay, so back to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. And please don't forget to click the like button. That really helps. And also subscribe to our channel for more videos, podcasts, and content. And welcome to another podcast of Fantastic Fluency. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about hobbies. That's right, hobbies. And I'm curious to find out what are your hobbies and what the hobbies are of all the people who are listening to this podcast. So chances are you probably have a hobby. Maybe you don't have a lot of time to be doing this hobby, but most people have hobbies. So we're going to be looking at what exactly is a hobby and the history of hobbies, why people do hobbies, who does what hobby, and what hobbies are popular. And again, I'm curious to know what your hobbies are. Well, a hobby is an activity. It's considered to be an activity that you do on a regular basis, so that you do this activity with frequency, and this activity is done because you enjoy it. You enjoy it. You like it. This is something that there is no obligation for you to do. You're not paid to do this. You don't have to do it. You're not made to do it. You're not forced to do it. This is something that you enjoy doing, that you like to do, and that you have fun doing this hobby. So that's what a hobby is considered. And the history of hobbies, that's kind of interesting. So the history of hobbies in the English language, the word hobby was originated, I think, in the 1600s, around the mid 1600s. And it was based on a term called hobbin. And hobbin had the significance of a small horse and pony. So you can just imagine a pony, a small horse, and a wooden representation of this. So a small horse made of wood. So a small wooden horse, a hobbin. Now you can imagine the contrary or the opposite of this would be a large representation of a wooden horse. So what can you think would be a large representation of a wooden horse? Maybe the Trojan horse. So this would be a small representation of a horse. So a pony, it's called a pony. And a hobbin was referred to as this. And as time continued and I guess we progressed, hobby was later on, a few hundred years later, introduced in the English language to represent something that you do with passion or something that you do with enjoyment, an activity that you do that you're not paid for and is not an obligation. So, what are popular hobbies around the world? Well, if you ask me what my hobbies are, I would probably say that I have a number of hobbies, and it's depending on my mood, depending how I feel, depending on my mood. So I would like to participate in different hobbies. Maybe there are some hobbies that are very physical and they take a lot of physical energy. Maybe some hobbies are more intellectual and you want to think and you want to be considering things and thinking about things. Maybe some hobbies are more expressive and we're using our imagination and creativity. And maybe other hobbies are solitary. You do these hobbies alone. Maybe other hobbies are done with other people. So if you ask me what my favorite hobbies are, I would say it's depending on my mood or depending how I feel. But here are a lot of different hobbies, a lot of popular hobbies from people around the world. And that's the interesting thing about hobbies, is that if you talk to people from all different places of the world and every corner of the world, they will probably have a hobby. It might be very similar, it might be very different to your hobbies, but let's look at some of these. So most popular hobbies around the world, what do you think number one is on the list? And again, this is for a general age. So, older people, younger people. So this is on a very general scale by and large. Number one hobby, reading. Yeah. Reading is the number one hobby around the world. And if reading is your hobby, I hope you have read my book, A Practical Guide to Fantastic Fluency. But I hope you just read anything, because reading is not only a fantastic hobby, but it's a fantastic way of learning, of expanding your mind and perspectives of life. So reading is just a fantastic activity. And a lot of people read because they need to be learning about maybe their jobs, a lot of changes, a lot of innovation, and they need to be constantly learning. And maybe they need to read for their job. But reading is the number one hobby. So imagine if you had to, maybe a scientist or working in business consulting, and you're reading all this new information. Probably when you finish your work day, you've read a lot and you don't want to read more. But again, reading for pleasure as a hobby is a very popular thing to do. What do you think number two is? Well, this is kind of interesting because of the pandemic that we're experiencing right now, the COVID-19. A lot of people don't do this as often as they did before. Traveling is considered to be a very popular hobby, and most people like traveling. Myself, I like to experience a lot of different things about travel, but the physical aspect of moving from one place to another, by and large, I don't really like that. Maybe if it's on a train with a very interesting landscape and beautiful views, and but usually going from point A to point B to travel to a destination, I'm not a big fan of that. But I do enjoy experiencing different things when I get to another destination. So traveling, yes. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't like to travel, or there are very few people. So that's why it's number two, traveling. Number three, can you imagine number three? Now, if you ask a young person, number three might be very different than if you ask a much older person, a person with more experience in life. But number three is fishing. Yes. So fishing. A lot of people enjoy fishing. So there are lots of different ways. There are many different ways. There are a ton of different ways to fish. But people enjoy this hobby. And maybe it's connecting with nature. You're going out into the forest or to a lake. And maybe it's the experience that you really like. Maybe not really catching a fish. Maybe you don't even like to eat fish, but I think it's the experience more so than the actual catching a fish, trying to catch a fish. And you can try to do that. You can try to catch a fish. You can fish in a lot of different scenarios, and you can have different types of fish that you want to catch. So maybe you're going to eat the fish. Maybe you're going to release the fish, to catch the fish, and then to put it back into the water, and not to harm the fish. Some people like to do that too. And again, it's the experience. It's the overall experience of fishing. So is this something that you have done? Have you ever fished? Have you ever gone fishing? Do you like to go fishing? Yeah, this is something that's very popular. Okay, so fishing is number 3. And we have a lot of different ones here too. So for example, creating things using your imagination. So crafting, it says, creating things. This could be making bracelets or making sweaters, knitting sweaters, a lot of different ways to do this. Maybe it's woodworking and making a picture frame, but crafting is very popular. And again, people are using their hands to make something, and they're using their imagination. So that's very popular. Okay, let's see. Here's another one. Music. Music is a very popular hobby. Listening to music. So this just says music. We can say that's listening to music. That's creating music. It could be enjoying music in your car, listening to music, maybe as you run. Maybe this is listening to music at a concert. But there are a lot of different ways to enjoy music. And this is one of the most popular hobbies, music, or listening to music. And it's probably depending on what kind of mood you're in. Just like what I said at the beginning of the podcast, what are my hobbies? Well, depending on my mood, depending on the mood that you're in. So I think that's also the same thing with music. So if you're happy, you want to hear like energetic music with a lot of energy in it. You can move around and enjoy that. If you're sad, if you're feeling melancholic, sad, unhappy, you probably want the music to reflect what you're feeling. Yeah, I'm not very happy today, and this is the music. And then, I think it's important to express that. Not too long, but it's important to identify that and express it. And that way you can move on to the next emotion. And it could be, well, I don't know, it could be maybe you're working, you're doing some work. So you kind of want some music that will help you concentrate better. It will facilitate, it will help you concentrate better. So there are lots of different types of music. And of course, you can also use music for language learning. I don't really like that. That's not my favorite, but I think for young children, I think it's fantastic. And I think if you like music, then you should use music for language learning if possible. So music is a very popular hobby and activity. Gardening. Wow. I can just imagine some people going, like they're yawning, and they're putting their hand to their mouth and they're going, they're yawning. Gardening is not interesting, but it's on our list. So for many, 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 many people, gardening is a very popular hobby. And I also like to garden sometimes. I think sometimes it could be a lot of work, a lot of exercise, depending on what you have to do. But other times it could be, well, you could have a vegetable garden, or you could be growing flowers, a flower garden, depending on what it is. I think it's sometimes viewed as a good way to meditate. And you're just thinking about this, and you're not thinking about all these other things in life. So it's a good way to clear your mind. Gardening. Yeah. Okay. And let's see. Here's another one. Very popular activity, very popular hobby. Video games. Video games. So again, if you ask younger people, they might say video games is number one, number two, and number three. And maybe older people, like grandparents, they may say video games. That's a waste of time. That's not a very good hobby. I prefer gardening or something else. But it's interesting because even when I was a young kid, video games were becoming very popular. And now as I get older, even friends of mine, they have other responsibilities and doing other things, and they can't play video games all day. But even older people now, grandmothers and grandfathers, are still connected to playing video games. And especially now, there are so many genres or types of games that you can play. And it really has an amazing ability to make you think of nothing else but this game. So it's kind of like meditating as well. You're just focused on this game. You're not thinking of anything else. And I think that's probably a good idea if you do it for a short time. I mean, here's an example of this. I had a student many years ago, and he was a president. He was like an executive. I don't know if he was the president, but he was like an executive in a bank. And he had a very demanding job. It was a very stressful job. And he worked a long day, very long day, long hours. He worked a lot. And when he came home, he would have dinner with his family very late. And then he would have his English class with me at about 11 o'clock at night, his time. And after our class, and this guy was about 50 years old, maybe 50 something, 50-ish, more or less, ballpark figure. He was roughly 50 years old. And after our lesson, almost at 12 o'clock midnight, one day I said, "What are you doing after this lesson? You must be going to bed. You must be exhausted. You had a long day, a demanding day, a grueling day." And he told me, "No, Tom, I'm going to play a video game online." And I was very surprised. And I said, "Wow, what game are you playing?" And he told me the game. Can you guess the game? What game would he be playing? But he said it was a very fascinating game, and it was very detailed, and you had to do all these different missions in the game, and you could be it's like having this experience, and you're in the game, and you're running around, and you're shooting people, and you have to do these I don't know, you have to do these missions and all these things. Anyways, the game was called Fortnite, and he loved it. And he said he played for about an hour, 30 minutes maybe, each night after our lessons as a way to disconnect from his day and then go to sleep. So again, that could be a good way to relax, playing video games. And well, depending on what age, I mean, there is something for everybody with that hobby. And maybe if you like physical activities, they're playing sports or doing something physical. This could be yoga. Yoga is a very popular hobby. Have you ever done yoga? That's my question to you. Do you know anybody who has ever done yoga? Do you like to do yoga? Do you do yoga? How often do you do yoga? So yoga is a very popular activity too. And again, it's like a form of meditation, and you're connecting with your body, and you're forgetting about everything else. And yoga is also very healthy. I think you're working on your balance and concentration and core strength, and you could do yoga anywhere. You know, you don't really need to go to a yoga studio. You can do yoga anywhere, maybe, you know, in your office, at the airport, on the playground. I don't know about that. Some places would be kind of strange. People would look at you funny, but if you're if you have the ability to block everything out, if you have a high level of yoga discipline, then maybe you could do it in those places. But again, yoga is something that you can practice, and then you can be learning. You could be learning new postures and new moves, and I don't think they're called yoga moves. That sounds like kung fu or some sort of martial art. But you can be learning different poses, and you could be increasing your level of competency in yoga. So there are difficulty levels. And so this is something that you can be practicing with a goal of improving your mind-body connection. So yoga is very popular. I think it originated in India or in Central Asia, but it's very popular around the world. Okay, where you could be, your hobbies could be playing sports. So this could be like soccer or football. I say soccer, but that's because I'm from Canada. Most of the world says football, including in England. So maybe, in the United States and Canada, we say soccer, but maybe we should have said football and called soccer, or called the American football that we call football. Maybe we should have called that something else. I don't know. Anyways, so these could be sports that are team sports, could be hobbies, playing baseball. I like baseball, hockey, basketball, football, soccer, badminton, tennis. There are a lot of different sports, team sports and individual sports. So it could be like martial arts. It could be, things like, not non-combat sports. It could be maybe swimming or cycling. There are a lot of sports that you can do individually that are very popular as well. And again, you're getting all of this energy, and maybe you can focus on one particular thing, and that's always a good idea. So there are lots of different sports: running, hiking, exploring, nature. That could also be really popular. Okay, and like I said before, it's depending on where you are in life. Probably your hobby is going to reflect that. So maybe you're very physically active. Well, that's also in connection to personality as well. Or maybe you're someone who loves gaming. Maybe you're a gamer. Well, again, that's like playing video games. That's becoming a popular activity within older people now too. Or maybe I know that some people have hobbies of social media. That's becoming a very popular hobby now, especially during the pandemic, connecting with people on social media. So that's, a lot of people list that as a hobby nowadays. And maybe we can have some old-fashioned hobbies like cooking. Cooking, it's like, well, you have to eat, so you have to cook. And you're thinking, Tom, how could that be a hobby? If you don't cook, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you can't do anything else. Right, yeah. But cooking for enjoyment can also be a hobby. And a lot of people say cooking is a popular hobby for them. This could be cooking something new, trying to create something using your imagination, creativity. Sometimes cooking by yourself or cooking with other people can be kind of fun. Yeah. So this is a very popular hobby, and this is something that I think you can do with your family, nice family activity as well, helping cooking or preparing dinner and things like that. So there are a lot of different hobbies that people engage in. So what about you? I want to know about you. What is your favorite hobby? Maybe it was something that we've talked about in this podcast. Maybe you have a completely different hobby. I would like to know what it is. So yeah, please contact me and tell me what your hobbies are. I know also depending on where you are in the world, that could be very different. But usually they're the same as I listed, but maybe it could be very different. For example, having a pet, some people say having pets is a hobby for them. So maybe if you're in Toronto, having a cat might be very popular, but maybe if you're in, I don't know, Northern Canada, maybe this would be having a polar bear as a pet. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You can't have a polar bear, those big white bears that are near the Arctic Circle in the northern part of the world. You can't have those as pets. No, that would be crazy. But depending on where you are in the world, you can have a very different kind of pet. I know that I heard about this person in Central America. I think it was in Costa Rica. And they had a pet crocodile. And it wasn't really their pet because the crocodile was free. But the person would swim in the water and the crocodile would come over and they seemed to have a really good relationship. So, and I think this person had other animals that he considered pets. And, maybe he would feed the crocodile. The crocodile never ate him or anybody else, I don't think. So very exotic pets, maybe depending on where you are in the world. So, and again, this is with hobbies, you can, depending on where you are in the world, your hobby could be very different. So for example, like maybe in my house, we have a board game and it's called chess. It's a very popular game, chess. It's called different things in different languages, chess. But it's the same game. You have like the king and the queen and knights and pawns and bishops and rooks. But in Japan, they have another version of chess, and it's called shogi. So it's kind of similar, but it's different. So again, depending on where you are in the world, you can have similar hobbies, but they might not be exactly the same. Okay. So that's pretty much it for us today, talking about hobbies. I would like to know what your hobbies are. For me, that would be very interesting. And maybe it's something that we haven't mentioned. I think for me, remember when we began the podcast, I said it's depending on my mood. I have a lot of different hobbies depending on my mood. But I would say that a hobby of mine is creating 6-day challenges. So I really love to create 6-day challenges. You probably know this if you have read my book, A Practical Guide to Fantastic Fluency, and I hope that you have. But in the book, it talks about this. And I like to do what I call a 6-day challenge. And I like to do many of these. For me, that's a hobby. I like to do that. I don't get paid for it. This is something that I like to do. And it improves my life. It makes my life better. So I like to do that. And again, depending on my mood, well, geez, what are some of my hobbies? I like to play the acoustic guitar. Sometimes I like to do that. I like to work out and exercise, to go to the gymnasium before the pandemic began anyways. I like to do that quite a lot. Or at one point, I enjoyed running. I would run quite often. I enjoy, a hobby could be spending time with my friends. I have a group of friends and we like to play dominoes. So we get together at somebody's house every month and we play dominoes and we talk. And so that hobby could be socializing with your friends. So depending on what it is, depending on your mood, depending on time considerations, all these other things, your hobbies could be very different. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for us in this podcast. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope that you found this podcast to be entertaining and fun. That's exactly why we're making these podcasts. for you to connect with English as much as possible, to have more input. Okay, so that finishes this Fantastic Fluency podcast number 2. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your energy, and thanks for your commitment to improving your English with these podcasts. So I will see you in the next Fantastic Fluency podcast. Hope to, anyways. Make a commitment. Yes.